was in such a state of absolute shock, dude. It was like a stun gun was hooked up to me if there was another human being around, you know? So I just really had to be in nature. I have to thank all these child abusers, I guess, because without that challenges, I would have never built this strength. I really would have never had this relationship with Genesis 129 the way that I did, and figured out that really for modern man, we got the same thing as with Moses in the Exodus. We got to go back. We got to learn from the man. We can just simply step out of this toxic construct for a minute, building a better construct, rendering the old construct obsolete, as Buckminster Fuller says, because you're not going to reform any toxic construct from the inside. So moving right along, you know, and I'm finding all of this as I'm living out in the jungle. And this murderer's lying. You're never gonna believe this. My dad who was married to my mother, was helping out his brother who was really struggling at that time. He ended up making quite a living for himself eventually. Well, at that time, he didn't have too much money, so he had come to New Mexico and stayed at my dad's house. And this is before I'm born. Obviously, you'll see it here in a second. So I come here, and the investigation, the confession says that's the body of your uncle, right? Well, we need a DNA test too, so the doctors have scientific information to release the death certificate, right? So I provide DNA. Well, that DNA result comes back and says, I have been doing this for 25 years. I have never seen DNA between a nephew and an uncle this close. And that's what the line says at the top. So, dude, I even made a video about DNA. I did all this DNA research. This is 2011 when the Human Genome Project is just coming to a finish. So I'm like, wow, you know, my uncle kind of had the same life because he left at a young age, his abusive household as well, and went out and joined gangs and got jobs and picked up my dad. You know, my dad sees him another time on a beautiful golden motorcycle with a beautiful blonde chick. Another time he picks him up for prom in a Firebird. And my dad's had the fastest car drive of his entire life. He's holding onto the seats. His neck is wide. Oh, my uncle's looking at him, laughing, showing him how he can shift without even touching the clutch. Yeah, right. And so it's just like, oh, wow, you know, it was very similar to my uncle. Maybe because I had the same type of life. Epigenetics did something to my DNA. No, bro. Check this out. My mother, who is a whore, sorry, she's cheated on every person she's been with, and she just uses people. She just uses people, right? Everybody is there to serve her. She's a total narcissist. So again, she's married to my dad, who's got the money, all right? But biological father, it turns out, was this person who I never knew. He never knew. And after she took my dad to the cleaners, she started locking me up in juvie jails, taking a check off my head that way too, not having to do her job. Everybody in that system was like, you don't need to be here. Up until when I was 16, someone said, it's crazy that they were able to keep locking you up in these places. I'm going to emancipate you from the system. I can tell that it's your mother and it's not you. This beautiful soul who just had done 10 years at a monastery. He had cancer patches forming on the top of his head, and he didn't leave to have his cancer fixed. He had the stitches in the top of his head when I was talking to him. He didn't, when he goes and he finally finishes his commitment, then he gets his cancer redressed, then he gets the job helping little kids, then he has the angelic recognition, thank God, and got me out of that system. You know what I mean? But I was getting myself out of that system. Dude, they called me Houdini, literally. They were like, I remember standing on a yellow line, they were calling all the kids last names, and then they were like, Houdini. And I remember this clear as day. I was like, are you here? Because I was at the end. I was like, yeah, today, motherfucker. Let's see, you know, what happens, right? Because I was just continuously breaking out. Oh, and let me tell you, I would have never been able to break out if I didn't see another kid do it first. That's what gave me the idea, because I was 10 and they were drugging us. The first time I broke out, I don't even know how I got out. A kid that I ran into high school hall later told me, because I was roommated with him. That place, it jumped over barbed wire. It looked like I fell in a pyracantha bush along the way as well. And I had jumped 2 walls somehow. And just, I saw this Ferris wheel, and I ended up on the State Fair lot. And because I broke the trap somehow, even in the clouds, where it's like, all right, I don't know what's going on, but I know I have to get out of this shit, you know?
Like this video. Share with your crew. Subscribe for more. Follow a Brandon Angel Fitness on Instagram.